and we're recording. I will hand over to Rosie to just go through some ground rules before we get going.
Hi everybody. So yeah, just a few regulations. One thing, just hopefully listening as much as you can and paying attention to everybody. When the chance arises to say something and you've got a question, when Tash asks you all to do so, raising a hand just like so is the best way to do it. And we try to not, like Tash said, non-violent, so no blaming, no shaming people, speaking from I. So if you're making a statement that I think this, rather than so and so, blah, 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 thinks this. So we're not like gossiping, and keeps it super simple. Yeah, and being present. So yeah, over to you, Tash.
Do you want me to go? Cool. I'll just introduce myself. So I'm Chantel Lunt. I'm the founder of Merseyside BLM Alliance. And while Merseyside BLM Alliance don't support any particular political party, we do believe that marginalised communities should be politically engaged and politically active. And we do believe that any politicians in our region and in the country should see and understand the experiences of marginalised communities. So I'll be asking a few questions from those communities amongst other questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, Chantal. I muted myself there. So I will ask each of the candidates to introduce themselves. Do it alphabetically. So Joanne Anderson, do you want to go first?
Hi everyone, I'm Joanne Anderson. I would describe myself as a business consultant that specialises in equality, diversity and inclusion. I would also describe myself as a social entrepreneur. Social entrepreneurs care about the triple bottom line. They care about they pursue profit whilst ensuring they have a good environmental impact as well as social impact. I'm a councillor in Princess Park Ward and obviously stand for the mayoral candidacy.
And Roger Bannister.
Hi everybody, I'm Roger Bannister. I'm the candidate of the Trade Unionist and Socialist Coalition, or TUSC, for this mayoral election. And I'm standing mainly because I want to challenge the implementation of Tory austerity policies by the City Council of whichever political complexion. I am a retired local government worker, but spent over 40 years active in the trade union movement, in Unison and its predecessor, NALGO, and I aim to implement policies primarily for the benefit of the working class people of Liverpool.
Thank you. And Tom Crone.
Hi everybody, I'm Tom Crone. I'm the Green Party candidate for Mayor of Liverpool. I'm standing because Liverpool needs to move forward from 11 years of chaos and mismanagement under Labour. And we also need to take radical action on the climate emergency. With 7 years experience in the council driving forward the green agenda, I believe that I've got the vision and experience to clean up Liverpool politics and also to kickstart a green recovery from this dreadful pandemic. So I hope tonight that you'll be persuaded to make a really strong vote for climate action by making me your first preference on May the 6th. Thank you.
Thank you. Richard Kemp, please.
Hello, I'm Councillor Richard Kemp and I currently represent the Church Ward in Liverpool 18, but before that I've represented the Dingle and the Smithdown Road area. As well as being a councillor in Liverpool, I lead on health for our national body, the Local Government Association. I chair a charity called QS World Merit, which works with young people all over the world on the UN's Sustainable Development Goals. And I do a range of other things, including acting as an advisor to the Pan-African Local Government Association on issues relating to governance and probity.
Great. Thank you. And lastly, have we got Stephen Yip? Let me find your name.
Yes, yeah, it's just on mute.
Can you hear me? Yeah, Am I on now?
You are. You're not on video though.
Sorry?
You've not got your video
Sorry,
on just
sorry.
yet.
Right. Am I on now? I'm there.
Yeah.
Hello, I'm Stephen Yip. I'm standing as an independent candidate for the post of elected mayor. I've been working for the charity I set up, Kind, for the last 46 years. I have a vast experience of working with children and young people, and I believe that I have the skills, ability, and the humbleness, the humility to get our city out of the mess that we're in now.
Great, thank you. So I will move on to the first question. We'll do it in the reversed order, which means that Stephen will be first. And yeah, we've got a clock, so try and keep to a minute. If you do get up to 2 minutes, I'm going to interrupt you very rudely. So, first question. What will be the first policy change that you will be doing in your first 100 days as mayor?
I think that's a difficult one for me because I'm not a politician. I've said this at the very start of my campaign. I believe that what we need in this city is a coalition of the good and the willing. So we need to bring together people who have the ability and the answers to look at some of the major problems that are affecting our city at present. And that's what I think, that's the difference I would make. I also believe that we need transparency, accountability, and most of all, oversight of our council and council officers. And I feel before we do anything else, we have to get this sorted.
Thank you. Next one, Richard Kemp, please.
We haven't got 100 days. By the 24th of May, we have to produce an improvement plan and submit it to the government following the annual meeting of the council. That needs to look at two things, in my view: how the council works, because there is no escaping all the problems which have led to Liverpool Council being branded quite correctly as the worst in the UK. So we've got to do things inside the council, but we've got to do things outside the council as well. And in policy terms, to start the process of looking at what our society will look like after Brexit and after the coronavirus pandemic. Both of those are problems, but in my view, both of them are opportunities which perhaps we can expand on in subsequent questions.
Thank you. So next one is Roger Bannister. What's the first policy change you'd do in the 100 days?
The first one I bring in over the 100 days is say no more cuts, and make sure that's carried through across the council. I think that's very tied in, by the way, with the restoration of democracy to the city and doing everything I could to get the commissioners out. The people of Liverpool should decide what happens in their city, not commissioners appointed by the Tory government.
Thank you. And finally, Joanne Anderson, please. What's the first policy change you'll be doing?
So the work is in motion around the governance and the improvement plan, obviously a massive priority. Violence against women and strategy in the region is absolutely appalling at the moment. Issues that were problems before COVID have been exacerbated during COVID. So in terms of violence against women, we've had, I think it's 118 deaths in the last year in the UK, with a large proportion of them in Liverpool, with 3 women being murdered in February alone. So violence against women, obviously the call reports and our actions of climate change are massive priorities, but violence against women is the first strategy area, policy area that I'd look at.
Thank you. Sorry, I messed up the order then. Tom, what's your first policy change?
Okay, so first of all, within 100 days, I would hope to have got a lot of policies up and running. And also, Richard is right, we do have the urgent task of making sure the commissioners don't take over the running of Liverpool. But aside from those two things, a priority for me would be getting to grips with the issue of air pollution within the city. It's costing hundreds of lives every year in this city. And it's also, a recent report showed, it's also costing our economy a huge amount of money by the lack of action on this. And there are so many benefits from tackling air pollution. I would look to reduce road traffic by a half within the first year of being mayor. This will mean quieter, safer streets, clean air that's fit to breathe. And it also means there'll be great alternatives in place. So people will have better use of public transport, active travel options, which mean they'll be more active and healthy. So absolutely tackling the scourge of poor air quality in Liverpool.
Thank you. Just pause in case Steve Rodford wants to suddenly be here, but I don't think he does. And we have invited the Conservative candidate as well, and I will say that they have not said that they are coming. Thank you all. Next question. These are all questions that have been submitted from people when they've registered. And the first person I'll be asking this to is Richard Kemp. What would you do to improve the lives of Black members of the community? How will you address racial inequality on the council and across the city as a whole?
There are limits to what the council can do, but that doesn't mean to say there isn't a lot that we can do. The pandemic has shown absolutely critically the great effects of poverty, poor housing, poor jobs, insecure jobs, and poor education. Those are not just a problem for people from ethnic minorities, but many ethnic minorities, for a variety of reasons connected with prejudice, find themselves in those positions. And so you can say quite clearly that racism is a killer. What we need to do is to make sure that people from all faiths, all colours, all sexual preferences actually have the same chance as white middle-aged men like me. We need to do an audit of the jobs that are available and why people from certain communities don't get them. We have to put special emphasis into education to give everyone an even start. We have to show by example. At the moment, since the death of Ronald Anaya, there are absolutely no senior management from ethnic minorities in the council. So I think it's very important that the council sets the lead. Until we set the lead, we can't put pressure on all the other employers, like the ones in Liverpool 1, where there are very few people from ethnic minorities, although Liverpool 1 is within such easy reach of where ethnic minority representatives live. So it's give people equal opportunities and educate other people to accept the role that people from ethnic minorities can play.
Thank you. And next answer from Tom Crone, please. You're muted.
Thank you for that. So Liverpool's got a very specific history in relation to the fact that much of the wealth this city was built on comes from the trafficking of enslaved Africans. So we need to put that right one way or another. We've had some modest attempts within Liverpool to do this through the erection of signs to explain the history of some of the place names in the city. That hasn't been done quickly and extensively enough, in my opinion. And I also think it's just a start. I'm very proud of the fact that the Green Party is the first and only party in, national party to have a policy in favour of reparations for the trafficking of enslaved Africans. You're struggling to hear a little bit.
No, it's okay. I think someone was on.
Basically, what I would do as mayor is I would make Liverpool a city that declares its support for a national investigation into the issue of reparations. And I think that would be a very strong message for a city as big and important as Liverpool to send to the national government.
Thank you. Roger, what would you do to improve the lives of Black members of the community?
Well, I agree that much of the issue rests in the poverty that is disproportionately visited on members of the Black community. But beyond that, it's what you're going to do about it. How are you going to produce jobs and improve living standards? Firstly, I'm the only candidate that's pledged to build council houses at affordable rents. That in itself would create employment opportunities and give improved housing to get people out of some of the slums that sadly still exist in the community. I think jobs creation automatically, in my book, goes along with the encouragement of strong trade union organisation to ensure that workers aren't exploited at work by unscrupulous bosses, which sadly is still a feature of life in Liverpool as it is elsewhere in the United Kingdom. And I also think at the end of the day, if you're serious about helping the Black community, then you've got to listen to the Black community, to their representatives, find out what they wish you to do, and keeping that channel of communication open, or creating that channel of communication, I think is very important.
Thank you. And next one, Joanne Anderson, please.
So employing a Black, a Black female leader in the top position is a really good start, I think, in improving Black people's lives in Merseyside, because it has a knock-on effect. I've been doing this for 30 years, since the death of Stephen Lawrence, which is 28th anniversary of Stephen Lawrence is a couple of days away on the 26th of April. In 30 years of working on race equality and working on race equality in this city, the time for words are over. We don't need any more reports. We don't need any more evidence base. We don't need any more consultations. What we need is positive action to address the inequalities for Black people in Liverpool. And I'm working on that, whether I become mayor or not. So a positive action strategy across the region is something I've been campaigning for a long time, and that's something I will implement straight away.
Thank you. And finally, Stephen, yeah, please.
I think COVID has given us a once in a lifetime, once in a generation opportunity now to change things, to radically look at the way we want our Liverpool community. And I really believe that as an independent, we can bring people together. And I would agree with Roger, we have to listen. We don't have all the answers. And the idea is to bring people together who have knowledge, who have the skills, and to address the issues of racism, to address the issues of prejudice. I've worked with children for 46 years. Education is the key. And sadly, very sadly, we need to improve that, and not only for our children, but for our 16 to 18-year-olds. We really need now to have this opportunity of changing the way we look at things. And I think Liverpool could be a city that other cities look to and say, that's how you do it. That's how you address these major problems. And that's what I'm hoping for.
Thank you. So next question then. Richard, is that a hand up? I wasn't sure. No, you're just waving. Okay. Feel free to use your hand function if you want to come back on anything, candidates. The next question, I'll start with Tom Crone for this one. How will you tackle child poverty and improve life chances for children and young people in Liverpool?
Well, it's a huge issue. Obviously, the council has a role in education and in youth services, and also very importantly in child social care. And as mayor, I will, the mayor has a kind of role to play in overseeing the functioning of all those departments, which have a really, really massive impact in the kind of life and the life chances of the young people of this city. So I will take that massively importantly. One of the things I've done as a councillor is I've promoted sports facilities and sports activities, and that's something that I would continue to do. So it's about prioritising those things and making sure where you can have a positive influence on a kid's life, you make sure you do that. So absolutely, there are loads of organisations across the city doing really important work with young people, and as mayor I would make it my business to visit as many of those as possible and make sure that they are properly supported, given the resources they need, and are able to function effectively for the good of young kids of our city.
Thank you. Next from Roger Bannister, please.
Well, a lot of the answer of this lies in reversing the cuts, in particular to children's services, the youth service of the city, which is, I was going to say decimated, it's more or less non-existent as a result of policies of recent city councils. Proper educational opportunities is important. I have always opposed the abolition of the educational maintenance allowance, which I thought was a particularly nasty attack on the ability of working class young people who perhaps missed out at a certain stage in education to return via further education. I think that's something that needs sorting out. At the moment, we have a constant struggle by students up and down the country to obtain free education, free university education, free college education. I support those campaigns. I have been on demonstrations with those young people, and I've done what I can to support them. Again, there are measures that the mayor can implement, and there are also measures that the mayor can take, and we can all take, to show that we support these movements. I've been part of that. I'm proud to have been so.
Thank you. And I think it's Joanne Anderson next. What would you do for child poverty?
So our mayoral hardship fund has really supported people in the city for a number of years, and we will continue to put resources into our mayoral hardship funds and our ward budgets in tackling child poverty and people's life chances at a local level. We've put 3 million into children's centres from our budget, and I also am very passionate about ensuring that we pay a living wage within the city and that we use our influence as a local authority, particularly around procurement, that we pay proper wages to tackle in-work poverty that will have the biggest impact on children and poor families, care being a particular sector that actually we could have a massive impact on child poverty by just paying the value in our care sector and what we do. Of course, education and employment and jobs is always the route out of poverty, but actually in-work poverty is a massive issue. And so making sure that everyone pays a living wage. We've been here before with the minimum wage, that everyone complains about it, and actually it's been proven from history that we can pay people at the right rate and not suffer in terms of economic disadvantage, but actually economic advantage that will impact on children and children in poverty.
Thank you. And Stephen, what would you do for child poverty?
I've spent 46 years of my life working with children and families who are disadvantaged. I really feel that, again, this is a once in a lifetime opportunity that we can do some massive changes. The third sector, the voluntary sector in which I work, has done amazing work with all of the cuts. Again, I think it's about partnership. We need to bring people together who have knowledge, who have the skills, and they need to draw a vision for how we want the next 20 years in Liverpool to be. I don't have all the answers, you know, and I think what I want to do is listen to people who have experience, like me, in this field, who have knowledge, and together we can work to make Liverpool a place to be, a better place to live, a place where children and families know that they will have the best opportunities.
Thank you. And have we had everyone for that one? No, Richard Kemp, sorry.
No problem. The simplistic answer is to put more money in people's pockets. One of the things that I'm in favour of, and I think we can do something about this locally, but it's a national policy, is introduce a universal basic income in which every family, every individual has the basis of finance to live without resourcing to means allowances or food banks. And if we did that, that gives stability to families as well. But of course, a lot of the people who live on poor incomes are there because of 0 hours contracts. It's not only that they don't get enough money, it's that they can't plan for their financial future. So it's quite complex with many of the things outside our control. But we do control education, and we have a failing education system in Liverpool, one of the worst of any cities in the country. we have had more young people enter our services through the youth service because of the pandemic, and we still have to react to that. And here I'm not being critical of anyone in the council, because every council has had similar problems, but we've got to take it seriously, and we've got to find ways of putting more money into people's pockets. And I believe a universal basic income is the way to do it, and the council can play a role in delivering that.
Great, thank you. So we've had 3 questions. I think you're all pretty warmed up now. So if I think that you haven't answered the question, I'm just going to come back to you again now, if that's okay with everyone. Not that you're doing pretty well. Medium answering of questions going on. We've had a lot of questions about climate change and related matters, of course. So, I mean, first of all, will you be working to make the city carbon neutral, and how? What do you propose to exactly to reduce carbon emissions? And we'll start with Roger Bannister for this one.
Yeah, I'll definitely be working to make the city carbon neutral. I think that's an extremely important thing. I've got some experience of this. I'm a representative of the trade union on the local government pension fund for Merseyside, and that's one of the aims of that organisation in terms of our investment strategy. In terms of Liverpool, I think we're one of the few cities with a dreadful shortage of cycle lanes. That needs sorting out. We need to get more cars off the road. I think it was absolutely tragic that the tram system has been abandoned and the funding withdrawn for that. I would like to chase that up to have a rapid transit system that was carbon neutral, particularly up those routes which aren't currently covered by the Merseyrail network, like, for example, out through Dovecot and out towards Huyton, Kirby, etc., beyond the boundaries of the city. And I'm also concerned that the bus lanes were abandoned by, I think it was Mayor Anderson abandoned the bus lanes. They should come back. If we want to get people out of cars, then we've got to look at making public transport more plentiful, more attractive and effective and efficient.
Joanne Anderson, what is your view on carbon emissions?
So, of course, and we've committed to reducing carbon emissions within the City Council, clean air zones. We're in the process of working towards developing clean air zones. In terms of behavioural change, because I think that's what's required for climate change, creating the infrastructure of where people can enjoy active travel, as making it more difficult for people to use cars and making it easier for people to use public transport. There's a reason why everybody uses public transport in London, because it's efficient and it's on time and it's clean, and they're the things we have to concentrate on to make sure that it's easy for people to change behaviours. So infrastructure is really important to encourage behaviour change for me, but also food waste and how we manage our waste around recycling and repurposing and educating people. I'm very committed to, along the other activities around active travel and clean air zones. People have to understand that these small actions can impact in a positive way, and I think, you know, our strategy is to ensure that we have the environmental impact is taken account for all our decisions across the council, not just in a separate policy or a separate plan.
Thank you. And Stephen Yip, please.
Okay, I think, again, I'll say this again, it's going to be really boring, but we have an opportunity here. Liverpool is not a massive city. We working together, a green partnership, bringing in the university, unions, business, the third sector, faith sector. We could work together to build a vision for a cleaner, greener environment for everybody in this city. It's not an easy process. We can't do it overnight. But, you know, you've only got to look at the mess on the Strand, at Lime Street. It's absolutely ridiculous. There is no joined up thinking. We need a vision. We need a plan that involves everybody, a green partnership. And as Joanne said, you know, it's not an add-on. It should be the start at the base of everything else that we do. Because this is about not us, it's about our children. and our grandchildren and their children. We need to leave a future for them. Liverpool needs to leave a future for them.
Thank you. Just a point of clarification, by the mess on the Strand and Lime Street, do you mean litter or roadworks?
I mean the roadworks.
Okay.
It's backing up everywhere. You talk about, you know, air pollution. You've only got to stand there for 5 minutes. It's absolutely ridiculous.
Very true. Thank you. And next on this one, we have Richard Kemp, please.
Well, just following on the point about the Strand and Lime Street, I would attempt on day one to stop what's stoppable in those two programmes, because I believe that they will cause major traffic problems. They will cut off the north-south flow of buses and force people onto minibuses through the centre. By restricting traffic in this particular way, they'll lead to more queues, and what do we know queues cause? They cause pollution. And in fact, we've already called in, although it hasn't happened yet, the Cabinet's decision to proceed with the Lime Street development, which will go to Cabinet on Friday, but we've given notice we will call it in. Again, we have to be a council that leads by example. I'd like every building that the council owns and then the public sector own to be looked at for insulation and its ability to generate power through solar panels like the ones that I have on my roof. I think there are so many ways we've been looking at wind power and elements of tapping the Mersey and the power there, although that has been talked about in all the years since I first got on the council in 1975. And just one small thing to finish with on this point. We want this city to be a friendly place for bees and pollinators, because we believe that by encouraging more plants in the city, which need pollinators, they take a lot of the poor quality of the air out and return good quality oxygen. So sometimes it's the little things that count, and you don't get much smaller than a bee.
Thank you. Tom, I don't know if you've ever thought about this before. Have you got any thoughts on carbon emissions?
Well, funnily enough, I joined the Green Party 15 years ago, because back then it was already abundantly clear that global warming, the climate emergency, was going to become the defining issue of my generation. And 15 years later, we are where we are. And I'm glad to see that it's now a cross-party issue that every politician agrees with and the vast majority of the general public agree with. But what are we going to do practically? That's what's important here. So I'll talk about things that are going to be completely under the control of a mayor, that the mayor could directly influence. So first of all, as highways, one of the biggest contributors to global warming, we need to have huge scale modal shift away from motor cars and towards active travel and public transport. And that means making much more of our road space exclusively for the use of those forms of transport. Combining that with electrification, we can radically reduce carbon emissions from transport. Green space is a huge priority for me as well. So I would look to expand the availability of green space, especially in the north of the city, where they don't have as much green space as in the south, and manage that green space for the benefit of nature in a way that leads to carbon being captured and stored in the ground. And then I'll bring in a big project of mass home insulation and retrofitting to make them more energy efficient. I already showed at the budget meeting of this council in March how I would create a £25 million budget for that. If I was actually mayor, I'd have a lot more resources at my disposal, and I'd be able to set much more bold and radical priorities. So I would look to roll that out in a very big way. And just to say, we declared a climate emergency in Liverpool 2 years ago. There's been very little action, but what has been produced in those 2 years is a report, which is a kind of draft interim report about what the council should do. It cost the council £94,000. And basically, it's just a list of all the Green Party motions that have been put in the 7 years since I've been a councillor. So if we had Green leadership, we would be a lot further along the way now than we are. We need Green leadership in the future to start moving forward very quickly.
Thank you. I'm going to ask one more question before I hand back to Chantal, just because it has come up in a few of your answers relating to car use. So I'll just read the question. How are you going to persuade us out of our cars? What mechanisms will you put in place to restrict the use of private cars? Will you follow other authorities in charging zones for cars in the city centre? And does this disproportionately affect Black communities surrounding the city centre? So the first one for this is Joanne Anderson. How are you going to persuade us out of our cars?
So as I mentioned earlier, it's about, you know, having better options. So I live on an 86 bus route. I've got a bus past my house every 10 minutes that goes right across the city. But that's not true of other areas. You know, if you want to get from Everton to the south of Liverpool, that's really quite difficult. So ensuring that public transport is safe and easy to use would be a priority, I think, in persuading people not to use cars, as well as having options for active travel that we've made a great start on, you know, in terms of city bikes and the scooters. Seeing people coming home from work early in the morning using the scooter is really something I'm very proud of what we've achieved in Liverpool. So I live in the city centre and I live by the Women's Hospital, and in terms of Black communities being close to the city centre, we do, you know, it can be disproportionate if rules are implemented for the city centre that affect our local communities, not just in Liverpool 8, but around the Bull Ring, around Kirkdale, around other parts of Liverpool. So it's a balance of getting things done. So we do, you know, we encourage people by using, you know, by using strategies that make it easy for them not to use the cars, but also enforcing penalties and areas where people need permits in order to park, in order not to affect those communities that live there. But look, it's an issue all across the city, from match day traffic within, you know, within Anfield, to schools, too many people parking outside schools and not using public services to take the children to school. A whole strategy is what's required, but ensuring communities are impacted, not in a disproportionate way, is what my triple lock is about in my manifesto, about ensuring that the impact of our decisions are thought through and aren't detrimental to one community over another.
Thank you. Do you want to very briefly define your triple lock? Is that
the triple lock is all the decisions that we make, and the 7 key areas that I've looked at in my manifesto, I will measure in terms of its environmental impact, its social value, and its ability to promote equality and inclusion. So rather than just make a decision and say, this is what's happening in this particular area, all things will be considered in terms of environment and people.
Thank you. And next on private car use, Stephen Yip, please.
I think we need a bus service which is first rate across our city, north and south. I think it needs to be efficient, it needs to be clean, it needs to be cheap, and we may have to look at the Manchester model and bring it back into council ownership so that we actually run it as a council. I think that would encourage people to use the buses because they would be regular, they would be frequent, they would be clean, and hopefully they would be electric. I think also to encourage people to use walking and cycling. But again, we have cycle lanes that have just been thrown up and have caused so much problems. It's putting people off. We have to do this, as I say, as a partnership. We have to bring in people who have the knowledge and the skills and say, how do we do this to the best effect? You know, we have to speak to people like Tom, who's in the Greens, and to other people who have the knowledge, the university, and say, how do we do this for the best effect for our city? And it has to be something, as I say, which is a bit visionary, because it's not going to happen and then just next year we think of something else. This is going to be something that we're going to do for the next 20, 30 years for the future of our children.
Thank you. Next is Richard Kemp, please.
Well, we have to concentrate on what we can do. And much as I agree with everything that says about buses, and it's in our manifesto, actually that's run by the regional mayor, not the city mayor. But what we can do as a council is to recognise that we are the planning authority from Liverpool, and we can think how we might use our city in a very different way. I spoke earlier and said that perhaps Brexit and the pandemic can be an opportunity. I sit in my window here in Dovedale Road. just off the 86 bus route, which I use into town as well, and see far more people walking and cycling than I've ever done before. So we need as a council to think through what our city centre is going to look like, to stop the need for people to be going in, and particularly because lots of people are going to be working from home in future. We need then to rethink our district centres, because if we want a hierarchy that we insist on, first of all to encourage walking, then cycling, then public transport, and only then the car, we have to think how people can do more within walking distance and make sure that the walking is safe, particularly for those that are disabled. So I'd concentrate on what I can do, and that is to take big planning decisions to make sure that the city joins itself together as one big organisation, but in a very different way, recognising the districts and neighbourhoods of our city.
Thank you. And next on private car use, we're back to Tom Crone, please.
So yeah, I think a really important thing to remember is that the vast majority of people now get it, and they think that action on the climate emergency is really important. And individuals themselves want to live a greener lifestyle, yet they do feel kind of like it's very difficult. Maybe the buses are infrequent where they live. A lot of people are concerned that cycling is dangerous. So those are the types of barriers stopping people making those decisions. So better options is really important. Better bus services, better cycle lanes. But the issue of getting people out of their cars, we're going to need to reallocate a lot of road space to these other modes. And that is actually going to inconvenience drivers. That's just a fact, because you can't make the roads any bigger in Liverpool. So if we reallocate space, drivers miss out. However, research conducted here in Liverpool in the last year or two showed that even when asked those questions, the vast majority of motorists do support these policies. So, we've got the people on our side to take these really important, really urgent actions. And just addressing a couple of the other points that you raised, Tash, you asked about charging people to drive in the city. I think we have to consider this. I think, creating disincentives to drive is possibly necessary. Obviously, lots of carrot, give them good alternatives, but also potentially we might need to resort to stick, which would have the benefit of raising money, which we could then plow into making sure all these alternatives are really well designed and really practical. And finally, on the issue of Black communities, it's worth remembering that a lot of people, the most diverse areas in our city are often poorer areas closer to town where people have lower car ownership. And it's actually people from the suburbs driving through their neighborhoods that are polluting their air and reducing their actual quality of life. So tackling this and giving better options to those communities will actually increase equality in the city.
Thank you. And finally, Roger, on private cars, if you will. To unmute yourself.
Thanks. That's the sentence of our age at the moment. First of all, I want to correct something that Stephen Yip said. In Manchester, they have not taken the public transport into public ownership. What has happened is that the power to decide on the tenders has been devolved to local level, taking it away from Whitehall. Now that does give a greater flexibility locally. You have more control over fares, routes, etc. But it's not taking public transport into public ownership. You're still dealing with private owners. I'm a socialist. I do want to put public transport back into public ownership. I do want to see a corporation bus service running the majority of the buses in the city. I do want to see the foreign owners of the Merseyrail network that provoked a strike a few years ago, that I was proud to stand on the picket lines with the guards on the trains. I do want to see private ownership taken out of public transport, because while you have private ownership there, you have the profit motive. And while you have the profit motive, you're not serving the public. Ultimately, you're serving some rich shareholders somewhere else. I'm also concerned about some of the proposals that some cities are toying with, like congestion charges. I think they sound an easy thing to do. But basically, you are charging ordinary working class people, lower middle class people for having to use cars. And I think if we charge anyone, if we introduce taxes anywhere over pollution, it should be on the basis of the main polluters. They're the rich, they're the oil companies, they're the capitalists, they're the bosses that run the show. Let's charge them and not charge ordinary people for the money needed to clean up our cities and clean up the environment generally.
Oh, I nearly had to mute you then, but you managed to stop. Thank you. Okay, and that's everyone, I think. Yeah. I will pass over to Chantel now.
Thanks, Tash. Thanks, Tash. So the first question relates to policing, and I'll just give you some context for this question. So recently there's been a lot of campaigning around the Police Court Crime and Sentencing Bill, which proposes sentences of up to 10 years for protesters who are deemed too noisy or annoying, and also for anyone who causes damages to statues. So the question is, do you support the Police Crime Court and Sentencing Bill? And I'll give that one to Richard Kemp first.
Well, thank you for sending me the easy one, because the answer is no, we don't. We opposed it in Parliament, and we're absolutely delighted to oppose this because we think it's a repressive bill which is going to become a repressive act. We believe that people have a right to demonstrate, a right to reasonably push their viewpoint, to protest about what government locally or nationally is doing, and we believe that will be greatly hampered by this bill. A fundamental of democracy, in our view, is that those with power can be challenged in a whole variety of ways, demonstrating, but also by taking power themselves for some of the facilities that we offer. So let's unite, if we can, to deal with this atrocious piece of what I can only describe as fascist legislation.
Thank you. Same question to Tom Crone.
Thank you, Chantel. And yeah, like absolutely, the Green Party are completely and utterly opposed to this bill. I think it's disgraceful that this government is trying to clamp down on people's civil liberties and restrict their right to protest. I remember Boris Johnson referring to sort of scruffy hippies when the first Extinction Rebellion protests were happening in London. And I think at that moment there, he showed what he thinks of people who are standing up for really civilization, for the environment, and trying to prevent the collapse of our ecosystem. So those people, you know, the Extinction Rebellion protests were massively inspiring, hugely made me feel so much more hopeful about the future of humanity, and they completely changed the debate on climate. And now it's an absolute given that we're in a climate emergency and something needs to be done. We probably wouldn't be so certain of that, you know, in the mainstream if it wasn't for those protests. So to try and clamp down on protest in response to them, I think is utterly disgraceful. And we have the abomination that under that bill, it might become possible for somebody to get a longer sentence for pushing over a statue of a slave owner than they get for committing rape. I think it's despicable and it should be thrown out.
Thank you. And Roger Bannister?
No, I'm totally opposed to this bill. I don't know if any of the other candidates were on the recent demonstration in Liverpool against the bill, but I was there and actually spoke at the rally at the end of it. I think it's thoroughly undemocratic and needs to be stopped. A lot of things that concern me about this. I'm opposed in general terms to any attempt to cut down on the rights of people to protest or to demonstrate. And I'm concerned that the media are whipping up a scare in order to partly justify the passage of the bill through Parliament. We've seen that, for example, recently in Bristol, where, I mean, I lived in Bristol for 3 years. I was there at university in the 70s. And even then, we complained that there was a slave merchant statue in one of the main squares of the city. And it's been there, and it could have been taken down by the council. It's been questioned and questioned and questioned. And in the end, anger bubbled over. The demonstration recently in Bristol, there were very worrying stories in the media and elsewhere in the alternative media about provocative police tactics, the use of agents provocateurs, etc., etc. I think this is one of the most dangerous pieces of legislation we've seen for some time, and I think dirty tricks are being used to condition the general public into accepting it. Absolute disgrace.
Joanne Anderson.
So yes, of course, I oppose the bill, as does my party, the Labour Party. Truth is that property is being valued over people within legislation for centuries. This isn't a recent thing. And so if you're angry about that, you need to be angry that somebody would get a higher sentence for abusing somebody rather than damage to property. You know, it's in different aspects of legislation that actually people are less valued and receive shorter sentences than they do for damage to property. So of course, and the outrage against trying to punish people for demonstrations in comparison to pulling a statue down, of course, we're all really angry about that, but there's other aspects of the law that we need to be angry about that do place property over people. So of course, yes, we oppose it, but also we need to challenge and campaign that property is not valued over people consistently.
Thank you, Joanne. Same question to Stephen Yip. You're on mute.
Sorry, sorry about that. I agree with all the previous candidates. It's a terrible bill. We have the right to demonstrate. We have the right to say what's wrong. And I think everybody has that right. We should be allowed to demonstrate. We should be allowed to express our views. And as the other candidates have said, you know, it's wrong that property is placed above human people. So I would 100% agree. This is a terrible bill.
Thank you. And Steve Redford?
He's not here. I'll speak for him. He doesn't mind. Joking, sorry.
Cool. The next question is about the arms fair. So the 2021 AOC Europe Electronic Arms Fair is scheduled to take place from the 11th to 13th of October this year in Liverpool. If elected, will you stop this from taking place, and will you ensure that the conference centre does not host events that promote arms trade? So that question goes firstly to Stephen Yip.
Okay, yes is the answer. I would 100% agree that we shouldn't host these sorts of events. I think it's wrong, it's immoral. And also I believe that Liverpool should be above this. We should be promoting different values. We should be promoting ethical values, which would then enable us to host other things which we're more in agreement with.
Thank you. And the same question to Richard Kemp.
Yes, I campaigned against it last time and I'd campaign against it again and stop it. But I think we need to go a bit wider than that. I think we should look at the work of the Arena and Exhibition Centre generally. It's a wholly owned council company. And I think we ought to be quite prescriptive about some of the things that have happened there in the past. For example, field sports is not something that I believe should be taking place within council-owned property. So there's a series of things that I think we should review, take a decision on, so that the management of the arena knows what is acceptable to the people of Liverpool through its directly elected council.
Thank you. And to Tom Crone.
Yeah, I found it incredibly troubling last time the arms fair was due to come to Liverpool. I really don't think it fits with the ethos of a forward-thinking city like ours. So the Greens campaigned against the previous one. One of my councillor colleagues was a member of the group that was set up, a non-political group that was set up to campaign against it. And that first initial campaign was successful. We got the first one banned or cancelled at least. And we were pushing the previous mayor, Joe Anderson, to set up a kind of ethical policy for the convention centre, so we don't have a repeat of this. He did say he would. He told us he was going to set this up, and of course it never happened. And now we have it again. So I've already raised this with the chief executive as an issue. I'm extremely concerned about it. If I was elected mayor, I would try and get it cancelled. I would hope to get it cancelled. But the more important thing is to look at the convention centre and work out what are the right kind of events to be having there. Because as Richard pointed out, there was also a show for like hunting equipment, which is obviously also really against the ethos of the city. So we need a thoroughgoing review of the kinds of events that could be on there and make sure we have a proper ethical policy for the city.
Thank you. And Roger Bannister?
Yes, I'd do everything I could if I was the mayor to prevent this event taking place. But as others have said, it's not just the armed trade, that other things might not want to go on in the city, and I think we'd have to consult and draft standards of practice, behaviour, etc., that have to be upheld by any groups, organisations, companies, etc., that would want to take advantage of the hospitality of the city. We'd want the city to have a reputation for fairness, for humanitarian causes, etc., and not arms, and not anything nasty or vicious along those lines.
Thank you. And Joanne Anderson?
So due to my work experience, I'm a woman of practical action. I address issues like this on behalf of organisations in my day job. I will hit the ground running in lots of areas. It won't be about talking to people. I'll have done that already. It won't be about finding out what the issues are. I will have done that already. So in terms of this particular example, I've spoken to the deputy mayor about this particular issue, and I'm in the process of writing to the chief executive. But I've also partway drafted an ethical policy for hosting events in Liverpool that I will put forward as a motion if I become mayor in the first opportunity I get.
Thank you, Joanne. So the next question is about budgets. So with the impending funding crisis, will you make budget cuts when asked by the Tory government? And who's going to go first with this one? Tom Crone.
The Green Party are an anti-austerity party. For many years, while Ed Miliband, Gordon Brown, Tony Blair were running the Labour Party, we were the only party that argued against austerity, against cuts. And we know that the Liberal Democrats went into coalition with the Conservatives and helped inflict massive cuts onto this city. So we're completely against them. But as a local party within the council, we don't believe that setting an illegal budget would be the best thing to do for the city. If we were to set a budget that spent money that the council didn't have, then the commissioners would come straight away and take over the council, and you would have Tory rule from Westminster. That's just what would happen. So it's about setting priorities, being smart how you spend money, making sure the services that really matter to people are defended as much as possible. So I've campaigned to save libraries, one-stop shops, many things in the city. And it's about making sure those really important services are saved. And there's also a certain amount of leeway within the council. You can set priorities about how you spend capital on projects that can benefit the system and help the economy to be successful. So under the Labour administration, we've had press releases proudly boasting that they've got £100 million worth of roadworks on the ground happening at the moment. So it shows that if you have priorities, you can find a way to make them happen. As a Green, my priorities would be different. It would be about the climate emergency, having a green recovery from the COVID pandemic, and about nurturing and increasing green space in the city. So it is possible to do great things as a mayor and as a local authority, but it's about setting the right priorities.
Thank you, Tom. Same question to Roger Bannister. Roger, same questions. Oh, yeah.
Yeah, sorry, I was just forgetting to unmute again. I just want to correct a point that, well, not correct a point, respond to a point that Tom's just made about the Greens and austerity, because not long ago, the Green Party did control the council in Brighton on the south coast, where they made plenty of cuts at the behest of the Tory government. So I think we need to take the Green Party as it is as a national entity, as well as listening to the comments that Tom's made. I've made it quite clear, and I said it in my opening statement, that I am opposed to all cuts and I would refuse to implement cuts. Initially, I would use reserves, possibly sensible, judicious borrowing in order to produce a balanced budget with no cuts. That's something that can't be repeated, obviously, year on year. That would be a tactical measure, in a sense, to enable us to buy time to organise a fight to restore proper funding to the city from the Tory government, a fight based on the trade unions and from there on the wider working class in the city, in order to get what we need to keep this city going. It was implemented in the 1980s. It's been lied about and distorted ever since then, but that council, that socialist council, stood up to the Tories, organised amongst the workers and forced £60 million extra from the Tory government to the city. If it's been done once, we can do it again. The people of Liverpool are just as keen on standing up for their city and fighting them now as they were at that time. Thanks.
Thank you. And Joanne, same question to you.
So obviously, you know, in terms of balancing a budget, I'm proud to say that the Labour Party have a balanced budget at this year, beginning of the financial year. We obviously doing everything in our power to not make cuts and make sure that even services that we are trying to make better and smarter. So, for example, moving some of the services providing one-stop shops into libraries to ensure that people in communities still access services. Our priority is about making sure our services reach all sections of our community, and I do think we need to push back against the Tory cuts, but I wouldn't do it in a way that I would do it in conjunction with other local authorities across the country. 70% of our budget has been cut by central government in the last 10 years. That's huge, and we can't accept any more. So my focus will be ensuring that all the revenue that is outstanding, that we can claim for, that we put a concentrated effort in reclaiming some of the money that's owed to us, to increase in income where we can, to ensure we adopt smarter options so that we don't have to make any cuts, and also work with others in a collegiate way about pushing back against Tory austerity.
Thank you, Joanne. And Stephen, yeah?
I think we have to have a balanced budget. I think we have to work across the board to ensure that those most in need are protected, the elderly, children, those in care. It's hard, as I say, I'm not a politician, but I know from working with a charity that we do have to have a balanced budget. But there are areas that we need to look at as well. I mean, over 2 years running costs for this council has been lost in the last 10 years, £100 million, according to the Max Keller report. So there is money available, and we need to ensure that every single penny that we have in this council is used to its maximum efficiency. And we have to be looking at new and exciting other ways of bringing in new income in order to ensure that our city is able to provide its services and to provide excellent opportunities for our whole community.
Thank you. And same question to Richard Kemp.
We've lost £100 million over the last 9 years. Just think what £100 million could have done. That ignores a huge amount of money, in my opinion, that's been wasted, particularly on road schemes. I already mentioned Lime Street and the Strand, but I can see roads in this city which haven't been repaired once in that time, not even twice, but 3 times, because we don't get it right the first time we spend our money. So my emphasis would be on getting value for money, because frankly, the council is very limited in what it can do. Tom is slightly wrong when he says that the commissioners would come in if we didn't balance the budget. The fact is that even as he and I go to move an amendment in the council, that has to be approved by the chief finance officer to say that it is legal and it would work. And if the council tried to move a budget that wasn't balanced, then she and the chief executive and the monitoring officer, the chief solicitor, have the power to step in and impose a budget on us. And that's why we must work to get value for money, because the alternative would be the politicians making no decisions at all.
Thank you. So the next questions are slightly longer. I'll just read them out, but they're very important issues. So the first one is violence against women. It's been claimed that local services have failed in their responsibility to respond to violence against women and girls, particularly in Liverpool. What do you think has contributed to local failures, and how can you change this? And what will you do to tackle domestic violence and violence against women and girls in our city? And I'll aim this question to Roger Bannister first, if that's okay.
Yeah, that's fine. Thank you very much. I think I'd like to see whether or not there's been funding cut from those essential services that deal with these crucial matters, and if they had, restore it. I'd also want to know whether any more needed to be done. That would obviously involve consulting with the people involved in this work, the people that run the refuges and deal with women in these disgraceful circumstances, and work with them to produce and improve and increase the services where that needs to be done. I also think there's a wider educational job to be done, starting in the schools, about respect, obviously targeting initially boys in schools. I think there's a culture that's encouraged by parts of the media that prides the macho-ness, that doesn't sufficiently challenge the inequalities and inequalities demonstrated in attitudes between one person and another. And I think that needs to be tackled. It's a big job tackling the effects of the mass media, but it's a job that needs to be done. At the end of the day, we cannot live while half of humanity goes in fear of walking about at night. There are practical measures, street lighting, discussing these matters with the police about increasing patrols where they can, and again addressing funding there. But I think it's a root and branch question that goes certainly goes beyond the mayor, but the mayor and the council have an important role in sorting it out. And it's almost a cradle to a grave issue as far as I'm concerned.
Thank you, Roger. Same question to you, Joanne.
So, having worked on this issue for over 10 years within the Crown Prosecution Service, I do think that misogyny being a hate crime will impact on behaviour, but there's many issues within the system that are broken, that we've been in a better place previously because there was additional resources. So I'm committed, and I have committed to a Violence Against Women Summit at a regional level, working with Police and Crime Commissioner, as well as the Metro Mayor, and hopefully the other local authorities coming on board to address, to put in place a strategy to tackle violence against women. The issue of rape across the country is absolutely appalling in terms of the prosecution rate. In terms of the prosecution rate and the attrition rate around hate crimes towards women, that message alone sends out to society that women's lives aren't worth very much. So as I said earlier, I was absolutely making a priority in terms of policy. I would work with others on violence against women and girls, but also, as I have done on a national level, you know, we have experts in our region who work with women who are very vulnerable, and their voice needs to be paramount in the strategy to tackle violence against women and girls.
Thank you, Joanne. Same question to you, Stephen. Yep.
I think Joanne's right. It's about bringing in the experts. It's about partnership. I mean, violence against women and young girls is not just a female problem, it's a societal problem. We have to look at it. School, education, we need to be working with our young boys. As Roger was saying, we need to be inculcating respect in them. And really, we have to look at it as well, it's not about saying, oh, women shouldn't be out at night. It might be better to say men shouldn't be out at night, because it's men who are the perpetrators in this case. So I think we have to have a partnership approach again, bringing in the experts who know what they're talking about, who have experience. You know, I was a volunteer in Women's Aid in the 70s. I've stayed in contact with Women's Aid all through my career in the charity. And I think they have the knowledge, and there's lots of other women who have the knowledge who can help us to address this problem.
Thank you. Same question to Richard Kemp.
I think we have to recognise that we need to talk about what the Mayor and the Council can do here, because many of the things that I'd like to see done are actually for the police and the Police Commissioner. I think, however, there are two key areas that the City Council and the Mayor can get involved in. The first is that of education, and I believe there is a total disrespect from some people in this city for people of other genders, other races and other faiths. And the only way we can deal with that is to take that head on through the education system. Now, having said that, I'm appalled at the number of people I meet who are just absolutely despicable in their beliefs. I met some people on Friday night when I was canvassing who don't believe there's coronavirus, thinks we have too many blacks in the country who are damaging our culture. And there are some people that I don't think that I think are incorrigible. But the other thing we must do is to care properly. The pandemic has caused a lot of domestic violence, a lot of domestic family breakups, and we need to absolutely look at how we take people away, women and children, away from these difficult domestic circumstances and provide them quickly and rapidly with a decent home and with decent support to help them through the trauma of those problems. I think as we come out of the pandemic, we'll have to spend a lot more time looking at this issue.
Thank you, Richard. Same question to Tom Crone.
Thank you. Yeah, violence against women is really one of the most depressing aspects of our society. The fact that for many, many years now, the statistic that 2 women die every week at the hands of a partner or ex-partner, that's just remained static. As a society, if we really wanted to address that issue, we should have been able to stop at least half of those deaths or all of those deaths by now. It means we're not putting enough resources and enough attention into this really important issue. And it does feel like the issue of violence against women has come to a bit of a head with the death of Sarah Everard and the protests following that. And there might be several things contributing to that. It could be cuts to domestic abuse services. The impact of lockdown is thought to have had a negative impact in terms of violence against women. So it's a big issue and it's something we need to tackle. I'm very proud that the Green Party is a party that puts women front and centre very deliberately. Our MP, Caroline Lucas, is our most famous member, and we always have at least one female leader. That's a rule within the party, that one of our leaders has to be a woman. And I believe that culture where equality of representation should be a given, it should be mandated, I think would start to build more respect for women and show that women should be in positions, the highest positions in any organisation and within the country. And I think Richard's right, he mentioned that really this is one for the PCC, but as Mayor, I would speak to the PCC and I would say, what are you doing about complaints about harassment? How are you handling the issue of stalking? What do you do when you get a report about domestic abuse? And I'd want to know that those are being responded to properly, because women don't feel protected by the law at the moment. We don't have a high enough prosecution rate for accusations of rape and other forms of abuse against women. So we need to see these issues taken properly seriously within Liverpool.
Thank you, Tom. The next question relates to the Sewell report. So Tony.
Chantal, could I just come back in on that one?
Yeah, of course, go on.
Sorry, I could see you couldn't see me. I think you can get personally involved as a mayor. I don't think you should just push this over to the Police and Crime Commissioner. Our budget, our resources impact on our services against violence against women. Also, we lead strategic groups within the council. So I don't think it is a matter of saying this is somebody else's job. I think as a mayor, you're responsible for everybody in the city, and we all would be responsible for women as well.
Completely agree, Joe, and that's why I said I would want to emulate the way the Green Party always makes sure women are in positions of leadership and authority within the party. I want to create that in Liverpool as well, and create that situation where women are assumed to have as much respect as men in every situation.
And that's why I said that there are two key council services, education and social care, which should be heavily involved in this and leading in those particular areas. What we can't do is the legal stuff, because that is the police commissioners. But this is a big council problem, and the council should respond to it across all its appropriate services.
Thanks, everybody. So the next question is about the Sewell report. So Tony Sewell's Governmental Commission on Race and Ethnic Disparities has suggested, amongst many things, that slavery was not just about profit and suffering, but African transformation, and that Britain is no longer systemically racist and should be held up as a positive example for white majority countries. Are you aware of the report, and what is your response to it? And if I come to Joanne first, is that okay?
I'm not reading that nonsense, you know, the Tory party gaslighting a whole country about, you know, institutionalised racism doesn't exist at the same time where massive structural inequalities have not just always been there, but been exposed during COVID. I'm not going to waste my time. I have seen that the Liverpool City Council have participated, and I'm not sure in what role, and it's on my to-do list to write to the council to make sure that they withdraw any involvement from gaslighting at that level, government level gaslighting. Absolutely disgusting that the Tory party could try and convince us that institutional racism doesn't exist. And well, let's face it, in terms of slavery, trying to find the positive benefit, I mean, it's just a joke, isn't it? It's just an absolute joke. And I wouldn't put those words that are written down on paper into my brain.
Thank you, Joanne. Same question to Stephen Yip.
I agree 100%. I think even the people who originally wrote the report have now backed out and have disowned it. It's a nonsense, really, and disgraceful. I mean, it really is. To find anything positive in slavery is ridiculous, especially, you know, when we live in a city like Liverpool that really was at the centre of the trade, you know, and we still haven't come to terms with that. And I think that's something that we as a city need to address.
Thank you. Same question to Richard.
Well, I thought the report was bollocks, to be honest with you, an absolute disgrace. I've been with mayors in Africa to see the slave force in Ghana and more largely in Nigeria. We have a shameful past, and it's one that we need to think about and learn from, because slavery isn't a thing of the past. Slavery exists today, and it exists in this country, and it exists in this city. Do you remember, for example, about, I think it was 12 years ago, could be longer, the cockle pickers who lived in Liverpool, who died in Morecambe Bay? Look at some of the people in the agricultural industries. Look at some of the people who clean your car if you go to unscrupulous places. Slavery isn't an issue of the past. Slavery is an issue of today, and we must all work to deal with these issues.
Go on, if you need to carry on. Did you need to carry on then? Sorry, Richard. I think we just had some.
No, I just finished, actually. I don't know what came in, but I finished.
Brilliant. And the same question to Roger Bannister.
Well, I think firstly, I don't think any of us should be surprised that a Tory commissioned report should say that there's no problem with racism in society and should totally distort and misrepresent the legacy of slavery, because the Tories have been using racism to divide people for well, centuries now. That's what they're there for, to split working class people up along whatever lines they can in order to increase their power to exploit them. And the only thing that's a bit surprising is that they haven't been more subtle about it this time. Usually they rely on their mates in the gutter press to whip up this kind of nonsense. Now it's an official report. I think it's a great insult. Firstly, it insults the BAME community who suffer racism day in, day out. Secondly, it insults all our intelligence. Do they expect us to swallow this nonsense? Because I don't think I do, and I don't think many other people I've spoken to do either.
Thank you, Roger. And Tom Crone.
Thanks. Yeah, I'm in violent agreement with everybody on the panel. The report was an absolute disgrace. But again, what do we expect from this government? They were not sincerely trying to get to the bottom of structural and institutional racism in our country. That's not their agenda. What they were trying to do was whip up the culture war they're trying to get going in this country, and try and continue their war on woke and to annoy people they see as on the left. I thought it was absolutely disgusting, and I disregard the report completely. And the way that it just ignores the real life lived experience of so many people in our country, whether that's Black children in school who are more likely to be excluded for wrongdoing, whether it's Black children Black people who are 9 times more likely to be stopped and searched by the police, whether it's the health and income inequalities we have in our society that are quite clearly tracked against race. So it was, it missed so much that is really, really important. And it's a really important issue we do need to get to the bottom of. And to just publish something that did such a bad job was a massive failure by the government. And I thought it was really, really out of order.
Thank you. And the next question relates to City Mayor. It's the last one from me, and obviously I didn't submit it, but it was a popular one. So can you explain the difference between City Mayor, Metro Mayor and Lord Mayor? Why do we need all 3? And would you get rid of the City Mayor post in the future? So if we go to Richard Kemp first with that one.
Yes, I can explain the difference. But that would take some time. I believe the City Mayor position is absolutely unnecessary. I tried to prevent it being introduced, and I've moved a motion in the council at 5 special council meetings to try and get rid of it. I believe that the leadership of the council should be chosen by all the councillors. The councillors are the people who are directly responsible to the people of the city. It costs us something like £800,000 a year that I'd rather have used on services. I wouldn't get rid of the Lord Mayor, because wherever I've been with the Lord Mayor, and I went occasionally with my wife when she was the Lord Mayor, it's a very popular position indeed. I don't believe we need a city region mayor. I'd have a city region authority composed of the leaders instead. We're spending far too much money on bureaucracy, far too much money on politicians. We need to cut it out and spend the money on frontline services.
Thank you, Richard. Same question to Tom.
I also don't think that having the elected mayor model in Liverpool is the best way to run the city. The Greens have always believed that it puts too much power in the hands of one person. And as we've seen, it's led to really disastrous decision making in Liverpool. And it's going to take the city a period of time to recover from the effects of the last mayor. So I would like to see an end to the mayoral system, but I wouldn't just scrap it overnight. I mean, I voted in favour of doing so a few months ago, but what I'd like to do now is hold a citizens' assembly and look at every different option of how we could possibly run the city, and have a huge amount of input from the community about how they want their city run and what structure suits them. We have the prospect at the moment of the city's electoral system being determined by Max Keller, who wrote the report into the problems in Liverpool. One of his recommendations was Liverpool adopting a very specific electoral system. I'm concerned that an outsider should come in and after a few weeks in the city tell us how to run the place. So I'd like to see a people-powered decision on how best to structure Liverpool, and that's the best way to make the decision that's really going to serve the people of Liverpool in the long term.
Roger?
Yeah, I know the difference between the three, and I think, quite honestly, they could all go. In terms of the Metro Mayor, the powers could be exercised by the joint body comprised of the leaderships of the 6 councils in the Liverpool City region. In terms of the City Mayor, the powers should be exercised by the City Council. These strong, powerful individual mayors, Boris Johnson was praising them when he couldn't name his man in the West Country earlier on today, saying how good it was having these strong mayors. They take powers away from elected representatives. The budget of the mayor needs a 2/3 majority to overturn it. That's not democracy. That is putting too much power in the hands of one person, opening the door, by the way, to corruption, because it's easier to bribe one person than it is half of the planning committee or whatever. And even I'm not a fan of the ceremonial mayor. I think local government needs to be seen to be businesslike. It needs to be seen to be taking decisions competently and efficiently. And having someone going around with a chain round the neck, opening church halls, etc., I just think that's something from the past. I don't think we need it. It was abolished for a time in the 80s. Hardly anybody noticed. We should just have a leader of the council, properly elected, overseeing the work of the council.
Thank you, Roger. Same question to you, Joanne.
In terms of the civic duties carried out by the Lord Mayor, I'm not too bothered about the impact that has. Most cities in the country have one, and most towns have them. There is a role in terms of civic duties that actually would free up time from politicians because it's carried out by the Lord Mayor. But either way, I don't think that's a big issue for us. At every opportunity to vote against the mayoral model in Liverpool, I have voted against it, and I've had 4 opportunities so far. I've always been against the mayoral model, and I wouldn't say that the issues that we found recently are about the model. They're about the people who've been involved, not the model itself. But what I'm committed to, unlike Richard's, I don't think it is just down to councillors. I think it's down to our city to have a referendum on what they believe is the best leadership model for our city. And we've committed to that within the Labour Party for a full consultation to take place before 2023. I am in support of a Metro Mayor. I think devolved responsibility from central government is a good thing, and it requires good leadership in order to do that. What I am against is having 2 mayors, a city mayor and a regional mayor. I don't think that is helping anyone. I think it's very confusing to people, but I'm really in support of having devolved authority in our region. So yes, absolutely committed to scrapping the mayoral model, but I think it's up to the city to decide.
Thanks, Joanne. And Stephen, you?
I've agreed, if elected mayor, that I would honour the referendum. But I think what everybody's missing here is one of the most important things that this city needs is for any sort of leadership, whether it's the leader of the largest party, whether it's an elected mayor, is it needs oversight, transparency and accountability. And that's what we haven't had for 10 years. And I've been working with an organisation called Transparency UK, and I've asked them to come into Liverpool, if I was elected as mayor, to work out a system where we could ensure that whoever was in charge of our city was accountable, was transparent, and had independent oversight. It's something that we desperately need, and we would be an exemplar city. Other cities would look to us to see how we've done it. Because I also think it's important that we have a whistleblowers commission for our council staff, where they have 100% confidentiality, where they feel if they've been asked to do something immoral or illegal, they can go there, they can report it, and they know something will be done because it's independent from the council. And I think the oversight committee, which we'll hopefully bring in, will also be independent from the council.
Thank you, Stephen. Over to you, Tash.
Doing it myself now. Hiya. Thanks, everyone. We're running a little bit over time, so I'm just going to ask one more question, if that's okay, and ask you to answer it as quickly as you can. But I thought before I do that, if anyone in the audience is not registered to vote or is not 100% that they are registered to vote, you have until midnight tonight to do that. It's just a quite quick website clickety-click. So go and do that now. Don't forget. And for the mayor race, I think you get 2 choices. So you can rank 1 and then 2. So inspired by that model, I'm going to turn to the candidates and I'm going to ask them to imagine that they are not running and they are going to vote for one of the other 4 people that's here tonight, and ask you who you're going to vote for and why. So we'll start with Stephen Yip for that one.
Ooh, that's a hard one, isn't it? Who will I vote for? I think I would vote for the person who I feel most closely supports my views on the elected mayor, and I feel that would be Tom Crone from the Green Party.
Thank you. Richard Kemp, please.
I wouldn't use my second vote. I think it's highly unlikely that it will be used in my case. That's just a view on the electoral system in Liverpool, but I can see no other candidate that meets my liberal values. So I couldn't use it, and I couldn't recommend anyone else to use it either.
So you wouldn't be voting if you weren't running?
I would vote for the Liberal Democrat if I wasn't running as the Liberal Democrat. Of course I would vote, but I can't see any point in using a second vote in these circumstances.
Okay, thank you. Roger Bannister, who would you vote for if you weren't running?
Sadly, I'm the only candidate that's prepared to defy cuts and not implement cuts. So unless there were big changes, I don't think I'd be voting.
Thank you.
I don't believe in voting to cut services for working class people.
Great, thank you. Tom Crone.
So I wouldn't be able to vote for any of the members of the other political parties. For the Liberal Democrats and for the Labour Party, that's because I don't think they've got a track record that merits a vote. For Roger, I just don't think his proposals are quite feasible. Now, I would use my second preference to vote for Stephen, because I am aware that he is a very principled individual with a long track record of doing genuinely good stuff in the city. So I believe he'll bring his positivity and his integrity to the role, and I would be very happy to work together with Stephen.
Thank you. And finally, Joanne.
I have banned all manels, so seeing as there's not another woman on the panel, I wouldn't be voting.
Okay. Thank you. I'm just going to hand over to Rosie to finish up and say bye.
All right, everybody. So yeah, I just want to take this opportunity to just take a moment and just reflect on this evening. So yeah, before we go, if anybody else wanted to say something in the chat, then this is the time to do it. Or just for yourselves, just to take a moment to remember what's been said. And yeah, like Tash said, I hope everybody votes. And I believe personally that if there's nothing that anybody said that you agree with, every vote counts anyway, because you can make a difference. And thanks for coming and joining. And like Tash said at the beginning, this coalition with Chantel, that me, V and Tash did with this is just something that we're members of the public and we just wanted to organise it, and these kind of things can be hosted by any member of the public. So we encourage anyone else to do something similar in the future and for the next votes, or for something else, for a campaign you want to start, whether it's with BLM, with XR, or your own organisation. Yeah, looks like the chats are all coming through. So yeah, thanks again, everybody. Thanks to the candidates, and take care of yourselves. I'm sure everyone's really busy at the moment. So yeah, if you're not looking at the chat, maybe you want to just take a little peek, because it looks like other people have got some things to say. And hopefully the next one we do is going to be in person, so we can actually hear more of the voices from the public as well. That would be brilliant. We'll do our best and hopefully arrange something. So yeah, thanks a lot. And Tash, did you want to say something? Chantal, do you want to say anything?
Just thank you to everyone for coming along. Thanks for all the candidates for keeping it civil and respectful and for giving really thorough answers. Thanks, guys. Thank you so much to everyone who came along today.
Great, thank you. Thanks to the candidates again.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.
Bye.
Thanks, everybody. Cheers.
Yes, thanks again. Bye-bye.
Bye, guys.